It was supposed to be a victory lap, a sun-drenched escape to a lakeside lodge where success was the only thing on the menu. For Adam Mercer, it was a chance to celebrate the life he'd built, the one that had cost him everything, including his marriage to Nora. He'd brought his new girlfriend, Lena, a woman who fit perfectly into the sleek, ambitious world he now inhabited. But the universe has a funny way of reminding you of the debts you still owe. Across the shimmering water, a ghost from his past appeared, not broken and grieving as he'd imagined, but radiant, happy, and very, very pregnant. And standing beside her wasn't a shadow of a man, but a handsome, confident CEO who looked at Nora with the kind of gentle respect Adam had long forgotten how to give. The perfect getaway was about to become a crucible, forcing him to confront the man he'd become and the woman he'd so carelessly left behind. The air at the Heron's Crest Lodge was different, thin and crisp, smelling of pine and money. Adam Mercer breathed it in, a deep, satisfying gulp that felt like a reward. From the wraparound terrace of their suite, the lake stretched out below, a vast expanse of sapphire reflecting the late afternoon sun. Beside him, Lena Brooks, all sharp angles and effortless style, clinked her champagne flute against his. "To us," she said, her voice smooth as the silk of her blouse. "And to finally closing the Henderson deal. You earned this, Adam." He smiled, a practiced, easy gesture that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We earned this. You were the one who found the weak spot in their Q3 earnings report." Lena's smile was genuine. "I have my uses." She leaned against him, her perfume a subtle, expensive scent that clung to him like a second skin. This was right. This was the life he'd chosen, the one he'd worked for, bled for. The corner office with the panoramic city view, the tailored suits, the woman who understood that ambition wasn't a dirty word. It was a world away from the cramped two-bedroom apartment and the shared dreams that had slowly suffocated under the weight of his ambition. A world away from Nora. He pushed the thought away, a familiar, unwelcome guest. He was here to relax, to celebrate. He scanned the resort grounds below, the manicured lawns, the infinity pool shimmering like a mirage, the private boat dock where a sleek Chris-craft bobbed gently. His gaze drifted to the main lodge's restaurant, its outdoor patio buzzing with the quiet hum of wealthy vacationers. And then he saw her. It was like a punch to the gut, a sudden, violent expulsion of all the crisp, clean air in his lungs. Nora. It was unmistakably her. Her hair was longer, catching the sun in a way that made it look like spun gold, just as it always had. She was laughing, her head thrown back in a gesture so familiar it ached. But it wasn't just Nora. It was the gentle curve of her belly, a soft, pronounced swell beneath her sundress that his mind struggled to process. Pregnant? Nora was pregnant, and she wasn't alone. Sitting across from her, leaning forward with an easy intimacy, was a man. He was handsome in a way that seemed both effortless and infuriating. Strong jaw, a warm, genuine smile, wearing a casual linen shirt with the confidence of someone who had never had to try too hard at anything. He placed a hand on Nora's arm, a simple, possessive gesture that sent a hot spike of something ugly and unfamiliar through Adam's chest. "Adam?" Lena's voice cut through the haze. "You look like you've seen a ghost." He couldn't tear his eyes away. The man said something, and Nora's laugh, the real one, the one that used to be reserved for him, echoed faintly across the terrace. It was a sound he hadn't heard in years. "I think I have," he murmured, his champagne flute suddenly heavy in his hand. The Henderson deal, the suite, the victory lap. It all dissolved into a meaningless backdrop. The past he had so carefully curated, so ruthlessly excised, was sitting at a table 100 yards away, pregnant and smiling at another man. And Adam Mercer, the man who had everything, suddenly felt like he had nothing at all. The knot in Adam's stomach tightened with every step he took toward the restaurant. Lena, sensing his distraction but misinterpreting its source, had insisted they dine at the lodge's acclaimed restaurant, the Gilded Perch. "We have to celebrate properly," she'd said, oblivious to the storm brewing inside him. Now, walking hand in hand with her, he felt like a fraud. Each step was a betrayal, though of whom he wasn't entirely sure. The hostess led them to a table with a prime view of the sunset. It was also, Adam noted with a fresh wave of nausea, only 3 tables away from Nora's. He tried to steer Lena in another direction, suggesting a more intimate corner, but she was already charmed by the view. "It's perfect," she declared, sliding into her seat. He sat down, his back to Nora, a deliberate, cowardly act. He could feel her presence like a change in the atmospheric pressure. He focused on Lena, on the menu, on the ridiculously overpriced wine list. Anything to avoid turning around. "The pan-seared scallops sound divine," Lena mused, her finger tracing the elegant script of the menu. "What are you thinking, Adam?" He was thinking that he had made a terrible, life-altering mistake. He was thinking that Nora's laugh used to be the soundtrack to his life. He was thinking that the man with her looked like he knew how to make her laugh like that. "I'm not that hungry," he managed, his voice tight. Lena finally looked at him, really looked at him, her brow furrowing with concern. "Are you okay? You've been quiet ever since we got here." Before he could formulate a lie, a voice cut through the air, cheerful and direct. "Adam Mercer, is that you?" Adam froze. It was the man. He was standing by their table, Nora a few steps behind him, her face a mask of polite neutrality. The man's smile was wide and welcoming, completely at odds with the tension coiling in Adam's gut. "Caleb Ross," the man said, extending a hand. "We met a few years ago at that tech conference in Austin. You were on the panel about venture capital." Adam shook his hand numbly. The name registered, vaguely. Caleb Ross, CEO of some hot new software company. He'd been the keynote speaker. Adam had been jealous of his easy charisma even then. "Right, Caleb, good to see you," Adam lied. Caleb's gaze flickered to Lena, and Adam made the introductions, his words feeling like stones in his mouth. Then Caleb turned to Nora, who had moved to his side, her hand resting protectively on her bump. "And this is my dear friend, Nora Whitman," Caleb said, his voice softening as he looked at her. "Nora, you remember Adam." The use of her maiden name was a subtle, deliberate blow. Nora's eyes met Adam's for the first time in 2 years. Her expression was unreadable, a carefully constructed wall he had no idea how to breach. "Hello, Adam," she said, her voice calm and even. It was the voice she used with difficult clients, the one that betrayed nothing. An awkward silence descended. Lena, ever the pragmatist, was the one to break it. "Well, this is a small world," she said, her smile a little too bright. She looked from Nora's belly to Adam's pale face, and a flicker of understanding, or perhaps suspicion, crossed her features. "It certainly is," Caleb agreed. "We were just finishing up. It was great to run into you, Adam." He gave Nora's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Ready to go, Nor?" She nodded, giving Adam and Lena a final polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It was nice seeing you again, Adam. Lena, a pleasure to meet you." They walked away, Caleb's hand resting lightly on the small of her back. Adam watched them go, the sight of them together a physical ache in his chest. He had spent 2 years telling himself that leaving Nora was a necessary sacrifice, a casualty of his ambition. He had told himself she was better off without him, but seeing her now, pregnant, happy, and with a man like Caleb Ross at her side, he was forced to confront a terrifying new possibility. What if he was the one who was worse off without her? Sleep offered no escape. Adam tossed and turned, the image of Nora's serene, pregnant form seared into his mind. Lena slept soundlessly beside him, a world away in her own untroubled dreams. Around 2 a.m. he gave up. The suite, once a symbol of his success, now felt like a cage. He pulled on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt and slipped out, the cool night air a welcome shock to his system. He found himself drawn to the shoreline, the moon a silver disk hanging in the inky sky, its reflection shimmering on the dark, still water. The gentle lapping of the waves against the shore was the only sound. He walked along the deserted beach, the sand cool beneath his feet, his mind a chaotic whirl of regret and what-ifs. A figure was sitting on one of the large, smooth rocks that dotted the water's edge. As he got closer, his heart hammered against his ribs. It was Nora. She was wrapped in a soft blanket, her knees drawn up to her chest, gazing out at the lake. She didn't seem surprised to see him. It was as if she had been waiting. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, her voice soft in the stillness of the night. He stopped a few feet away, not wanting to intrude on her space. "No. My mind's a little loud tonight." They sat in silence for a long moment, the shared history between them a palpable presence. It was Adam who finally broke it, the question that had been tormenting him tumbling out before he could stop it. "You're pregnant," he said, the words sounding stupid and obvious in the quiet night. She didn't look at him. She continued to stare at the water, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. "I am. Is it Caleb's?" The question was a violation. He knew that. He had no right to ask, no right to know. But the need to understand, to place this new, impossible reality into some kind of context, was overwhelming. Nora finally turned her head, her eyes meeting his in the dim moonlight. The polite mask was gone. In its place was a weariness, a deep, bone-deep exhaustion that he recognized. It was the same look she'd had in the final months of their marriage. "No, Adam," she said, her voice devoid of anger, which was somehow worse. "It's not Caleb's. Caleb is my friend. My very good, very supportive friend who has been there for me in ways you couldn't even begin to comprehend." The unspoken accusation hung in the air between them. He deserved it. He deserved all of it. "Then whose is it?" he pressed, hating the desperation in his own voice. Nora sighed, a long, slow exhalation. She looked back at the lake. "It's mine, Adam. Just mine." He stared at her, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, turning back to him, her gaze steady and unwavering, "that after you left, after I finally accepted that the future we had planned was never going to happen, I decided to build a new one, on my own terms. It means I went to a clinic. It means I chose a donor. It means I'm having this baby by myself, for myself, because I was tired of waiting for a man to decide if I was worthy of being a mother." The words hit him with the force of a physical blow. A donor. She had chosen to have a baby with a stranger rather than with him. Of course, he'd been the one to leave. He'd been the one who said he wasn't ready, that his career had to come first. He'd made his choice. And now, she had made hers. "Nora, he started, but the words died in his throat. What could he say? "I'm sorry. I made a mistake." It was all so woefully inadequate. She stood up, pulling the blanket tightly around her shoulders. "I didn't come here to rehash the past, Adam. Caleb brought me here to get away, to relax before the baby comes. I had no idea you would be here. But since you are, let me be clear. I'm happy. For the first time in a very long time, I am genuinely happy. Please don't ruin that. She walked away, leaving him alone on the moonlit shore, the sound of the waves a mocking whisper. He had thought he was the architect of his own life, the master of his own destiny. But in the space of a single evening, he had been shown the truth. He was just a man haunted by the ghost of a future he had thrown away. And that ghost was building a new life, a better life, without him. The next day was a study in forced pleasantries and simmering tension. Adam and Lena went jet skiing, the roar of the engine a welcome distraction from the thoughts churning in his head. He tried to focus on Lena's laughter, on the spray of the water on his face. But Nora's words from the night before echoed with every wave they crossed. I'm having this baby by myself, for myself. They decided to spend the afternoon by the infinity pool. It was the social hub of the resort, a sprawling oasis of blue surrounded by pristine white lounge chairs and cabanas. Adam, hoping to avoid another encounter, steered Lena toward a secluded corner. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Nora and Caleb were already there, settled in a cabana directly across the pool. Nora was floating on a raft, her eyes closed, a serene smile on her face. Caleb was reading a book, occasionally looking up to check on her. They were a picture of domestic tranquility, and it was like sandpaper on Adam's raw nerves. Lena, who had been watching Adam's furtive glances, finally snapped. Are you going to stare at her all day, or are you going to tell me what's going on? Her voice was sharp, cutting through the lazy afternoon haze. Adam flinched. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? She shot back, her eyes flashing. You've been acting weird ever since we saw them last night. Her name is Nora, right? Your ex-wife? Adam's silence was all the confirmation she needed. And she's pregnant, Lena continued, her voice rising. A few people on nearby lounges turned to look. Let me guess, you're doing the math in your head, wondering if it's yours. It's not mine, Adam said, his voice low and urgent. Lena, keep your voice down. Oh, I don't think I will, she said, standing up. She was a formidable presence, her anger a palpable force. You bring me here on this romantic getaway, this celebration of us, and all you can do is stare at your pregnant ex-wife. How do you think that makes me feel? This has nothing to do with you, he said, a desperate, foolish lie. It has everything to do with me, she exclaimed, her voice cracking. Am I just a placeholder, Adam? A distraction until you figure out how to get her back? Because I won't do it. I won't be your second choice. By now their argument had become the main attraction. Across the pool, Nora had sat up on her raft, her serene expression replaced with one of concern. Caleb was on his feet, watching them, his hand shading his eyes. Adam felt a surge of hot, helpless anger. At Lena for making a scene, at Nora for being there, at Caleb for his quiet, protective presence, but most of all, at himself. Lena, this is not the time or the place, he hissed, grabbing her arm. She shook him off. No, I think it's the perfect time and place. I want to know where I stand. It's not his, a calm voice said. They both turned. Nora was standing a few feet away, wrapped in a towel, her wet hair slicked back from her face. Caleb was right behind her, his expression grim. Excuse me, Lena said, her anger now directed at Nora. The baby, Nora said, her gaze fixed on Adam. It's not his. I told him that last night. So whatever this is, whatever unresolved issues you two have, please, leave me and my child out of it. She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked back to her cabana, Caleb following like a shadow. The entire pool deck was silent, all eyes on Adam and Lena. Humiliation washed over Adam, hot and suffocating. Lena stared at him, her face a mixture of fury and hurt. "I'm going to pack my things," she said, her voice a choked whisper. "I'll have the concierge arrange for a car to take me to the airport." She turned and walked away, her back ramrod straight. Adam stood there, alone in the wreckage of his own making, the sun beating down on him, the silence of the crowd a deafening judgment. He had lost Nora once through his ambition and neglect. Now he had lost Lena through his weakness and regret. He was a man adrift, and the shoreline was nowhere in sight. The silence in the suite was absolute. Lena was gone. Her suitcase, her designer clothes, her subtle, expensive perfume, all vanished, as if she had never been there at all. The only thing she'd left behind was a single, perfect indentation on the pillow next to his. Adam stood on the terrace, the same terrace where this nightmare had begun, and stared out at the lake. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brutal shades of orange and red, like an open wound. He had called Lena's phone 12 times, each call going straight to voicemail. He had sent a flurry of texts, a pathetic mix of apologies and excuses. There had been no reply. He had replayed the scene at the pool over and over in his mind, each viewing more excruciating than the last. Lena's hurt, Nora's quiet dignity, Caleb's protective stance, and his own pathetic, cowardly silence. He hadn't defended Lena. He hadn't explained the situation. He had just stood there, paralyzed by a past he couldn't escape, and a present he had just destroyed. A spiral of self-loathing began to tighten its grip. He thought about the day he told Nora he wanted a divorce. He had framed it as a kindness. "You deserve someone who can put you first," he'd said, as if he were granting her a favor. He'd painted himself as a martyr to his career, a man making a noble sacrifice for his ambition. What a lie. He had been a coward, too afraid to admit that he was no longer the man she had married, that he had traded their shared dreams for the empty promise of a corner office. He remembered the way she had looked at him, not with anger, but with a profound, heart-breaking disappointment. "I never asked you to choose, Adam," she had whispered. "I just wanted to be part of the journey." He had left her with a generous settlement, thinking that money could somehow absolve him of his sins. He had thrown himself into his work, filling the void she left with 100-hour weeks and multi-million-dollar deals. He had started dating Lena, a woman who was as ambitious and career-focused as he was. It was easy. It was uncomplicated. It required nothing of his heart. And now, here he was, in a luxury resort that was supposed to be a monument to his success, and all he could feel was the crushing weight of his failures. He had not only broken Nora's heart, he had stolen her future, her chance at a family. And in her strength, in her resilience, she had taken it back. She had gone out and built a new life, a new future, on her own terms, with a courage he could only marvel at. She was having a baby, not out of spite, but as an act of profound self-love. An act that highlighted everything he lacked. The phone on the bedside table rang, jolting him from his reverie. He lunged for it, a desperate hope flaring in his chest. Lena. But it wasn't Lena. It was his business partner, Mark. "Adam, just calling to say congratulations again on the Henderson deal. You're a legend, my friend. A legend." The praise felt like acid in his ears. "Thanks, Mark," he said, his voice hollow. "So how's the victory lap? You and Lena having the time of your lives?" Adam closed his eyes. "Something like that. Well, don't have too much fun. We've got that quarterly review with the board on Monday. They're expecting big things. Big things." The words echoed in the empty suite. He had chased big things his whole life, and in his relentless pursuit, he had lost all the small, important things that truly mattered. He had become a legend in the boardroom and a ghost in his own life. He ended the call and sank onto the edge of the bed, the setting sun casting long, dark shadows across the room. The guilt was a physical thing, a heavy cloak that threatened to suffocate him. He had made a mess of his life, a tangled, ugly knot of his own making. And for the first time, he had no idea how to even begin to untangle it. The next morning, Adam checked out of the Heron's Crest Lodge. The concierge gave him a sympathetic look, the kind reserved for the recently dumped. The drive back to the city was a 5-hour blur of grey highway and self-recrimination. The silence in the car was a breeding ground for regret. Back in his sterile, minimalist apartment, the emptiness was even more pronounced. Lena's absence was a gaping hole. A few of her things were still there. A book on the nightstand, a bottle of face cream in the bathroom. Each one was a tiny dagger to the heart. He spent the next 2 days in a self-imposed exile, ignoring calls from work and texts from concerned friends. He sat at his sleek, glass and chrome desk, the city lights twinkling mockingly outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, and tried to write. He started with Lena. Lena, I don't know what to say, except that I am so sorry. You were right about everything. I was a coward. I was so caught up in my own past that I couldn't see the incredible woman right in front of me. I ruined what we had, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. You deserve so much better than the mess I've become. He read it over. It was true, every word. But it felt hollow, inadequate. A string of words couldn't undo the public humiliation, the casual cruelty of his distraction. He deleted the entire message. He tried again, this time with Nora. This was the harder letter, the one that was 2 years overdue. Nora, I saw you at the lake. I know this is the last thing you want to hear from me, but I need to say it. I am so sorry. For everything. For the way I ended things. For the man I became. For the pain I caused you. Seeing you so happy, so strong, so complete. It made me realize what a fool I've been. You're going to be an amazing mother. You always were the one with the biggest heart, the one who knew how to love without reservation. I was the one who was lacking. I was the one who was afraid. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see you. I finally see what I lost. He stared at the words on the screen, his vision blurring with unshed tears. It was the most honest thing he had written in years. It was also a confession of his own profound failure. He imagined her reading it. What would she feel? Pity? Anger? Or worse, indifference? The thought of his apology being met with a shrug was more than he could bear. He copied the text, pasted it into an email draft, and then let his cursor hover over the send button. His finger trembled. Sending this felt like a final, irrevocable admission of defeat. It was an acknowledgement that her new life, the one she had built from the ashes of their marriage, was better off without him in it. He couldn't do it. He closed the laptop, the unsent apologies trapped in the digital ether. He was a man who built his career on bold, decisive action. He could close a multi-million-dollar deal without breaking a sweat. But when it came to his own heart, his own life, he was paralyzed. He walked to the window and looked out at the city he had conquered. The glittering towers, the endless streams of traffic. It was all a testament to his ambition, his drive. But from this height, he couldn't see the people, only the lights. It was a kingdom of his own making, and he was its lonely, solitary king. The apologies remained unsent, a testament to his cowardice. He had built a life of glass and steel, but his foundation was crumbling to dust. The email to Nora remained in his drafts folder, a digital ghost haunting him. The one to Lena was deleted, an acknowledgement that some damage is irreparable. A week after his return from the lake, Adam walked into his office, took one look at the Henderson deal file sitting on his desk, and felt nothing. The thrill was gone. The victory was hollow. He called Mark into his office and told him he needed to take a leave of absence. "A what?" Mark sputtered, his face a mask of disbelief. "Adam, we're on the verge of the biggest expansion in the firm's history. You can't just walk away now." "I'm not walking away," Adam said, his voice firm in a way it hadn't been for weeks. "I'm just recalibrating." He didn't try to explain. How could he? How could he articulate the profound sense of emptiness that had settled in his soul? How could he explain that closing deals and acquiring assets felt like rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship? He spent the first few weeks of his leave in a fog. He went to the gym. He read books. He walked through the city, a stranger in his own life. He was adrift, searching for a new shore. One afternoon, walking through a part of the city he rarely visited, he passed a small, unassuming building with a sign that read, "Eastside Legal Aid Clinic." On a whim, he walked inside. The clinic was the polar opposite of his downtown law firm. The furniture was worn, the air thick with the smell of old paper and quiet desperation. The people in the waiting room weren't corporate raiders or tech billionaires. They were single mothers facing eviction, elderly couples fighting insurance companies, immigrants struggling with a mountain of paperwork. He found the director, a tired-looking woman named Maria, and offered his services. Pro bono. She looked at his expensive suit and skeptical eyes. "You're a corporate lawyer, Mr. Mercer. We deal with landlord-tenant disputes, not hostile takeovers. I'm a fast learner," he said. He started the next day. He traded his tailored suits for slacks and a button-down shirt. He traded his corner office for a cramped cubicle. He traded multi-million-dollar contracts for eviction notices and restraining orders. It was humbling. It was frustrating. It was the hardest work he had ever done. These weren't cases to be won or lost. They were lives to be saved. He helped a family of 5 avoid homelessness after their landlord illegally raised their rent. He helped an elderly man get the life-saving medication his insurance company had denied. He helped a young woman escape an abusive relationship, securing a restraining order that gave her a chance at a new life. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with a bottom line. He wasn't Adam Mercer, the legendary deal-maker. He was just Adam, the guy who could help you understand your lease, the guy who could stand up to a bureaucratic bully. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, he sat in his cubicle, staring at the stack of files on his desk. Each one represented a person, a family, a story. He thought about the letter to Nora, still sitting in his drafts. He opened his laptop, found the file, and began to write a new one. "Nora, I don't know if you'll ever read this, and I understand if you don't. I'm not writing to ask for your forgiveness. I'm writing because I needed to tell you that you were the catalyst for something in my life. Seeing you at the lake, so strong and so happy, it woke me up from a long, empty dream. I've taken a leave of absence from my firm. I'm working at a legal aid clinic. It's not glamorous, and it doesn't come with stock options. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. I'm not telling you this to try and impress you or to win you back. I know that ship has sailed. I'm telling you because I wanted you to know that the man you once knew, the man who got lost along the way, is trying to find his way back. Not for you, but for himself. I hope you are well. I hope you are happy. You deserve all the happiness in the world." With deepest regret and a small glimmer of hope. "Adam!" This time he didn't hesitate. He clicked Send. He didn't know if she would reply. He didn't even know if she would read it. But it didn't matter. The apology wasn't for her anymore. It was for him. It was the first step on a new, unfamiliar road. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt like he was walking in the right direction. The first contraction hit Nora in the middle of the night, a sharp, insistent tightening that stole her breath. She lay in the dark, her hand on her belly, and waited. When the second one came, 10 minutes later, she knew it was time. Her first call was to Caleb. He answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep, but instantly alert. Nora. Is it time? It's time, she breathed, a wave of adrenaline and fear and excitement washing over her. He was there in 20 minutes, a whirlwind of calm efficiency. He had her hospital bag. He had her keys. He was helping her down the stairs, his arm a steady, reassuring presence. In the car, he held her hand through each contraction, his quiet strength a lifeline in the rising tide of pain. The hospital was a blur of bright lights and hushed voices. They checked her in, settled her in a room, and the long, slow work of labor began. Caleb never left her side. He wiped her brow with a cool cloth. He fed her ice chips. He talked her through her breathing exercises, his voice a low, steady rhythm in the chaotic symphony of the delivery room. He was her rock, her champion, her friend. In the long months leading up to this moment, he had been her constant companion. He had gone with her to doctor's appointments. He had helped her assemble the crib. He had listened to her fears and celebrated her joys. He had been the partner she had always dreamed of, in every way but one. Theirs was a love born of friendship and mutual respect, a deep, abiding affection that asked for nothing in return. As the hours wore on, the pain intensified, blurring the edges of the world. In the hazy space between contractions, her mind drifted. She thought of her mother, who had passed away 5 years ago. She thought of the life she was about to bring into the world. And, in a quiet, unguarded moment, she thought of Adam. She had received his letter a month ago. She had read it and reread it, a strange mix of emotions swirling within her. There was a part of her, a small, wounded part, that was gratified to know he was suffering. But the larger part of her felt a surprising sense of peace. He was finally seeing the world, and himself, with clear eyes. He was trying to be a better man. She was happy for him, in a distant, detached way. His journey was his own now. It no longer had anything to do with her. One more push, Nora. You can do this. The doctor's voice brought her back to the present. She gripped Caleb's hand, his knuckles white in hers, and with a final, primal scream, she brought her son into the world. The baby's cry filled the room, a raw, powerful sound that shattered the pain and exhaustion and filled her with a love so fierce it was breathtaking. They laid him on her chest, warm and slippery and perfect. He had a shock of dark hair and a tiny wrinkled face. He was hers. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at Caleb. His own eyes were wet. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, then gently touched the baby's cheek. "He's beautiful, Nor," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "What's his name?" She looked down at the tiny human in her arms, her heart overflowing. She had chosen the name months ago. It was a name that meant strength and resilience and new beginnings. "Leo," she said, her voice a happy, tearful croak. "His name is Leo." Caleb smiled, a wide, genuine smile that lit up his tired face. "Leo Whitman, I like it. Welcome to the world, Leo." In that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the hospital, with her son in her arms and her best friend by her side, Nora felt a sense of completeness she had never known. This was her family. Not the one she had planned, but the one she had built. It was a family forged in strength and love and a fierce determination to create her own happiness. And it was more than enough. Chapter 9. The Epilogue in Paris. 6 months after she walked out of the Heron's Crest Lodge, Lena Brooks sat at a sidewalk cafe in Paris, a half-empty glass of Sancerre sweating in the afternoon sun. She was wearing a ridiculously chic, ridiculously expensive dress she'd bought that morning, not because she needed it, but because she could. The breakup with Adam had been educational. The first few weeks had been a blur of anger and hurt. She had felt foolish, betrayed, a supporting character in the tragic drama of his failed marriage. She had replayed the scene at the pool 100 times, her own righteous anger warring with the quiet, unassailable dignity of his ex-wife. But Lena was a pragmatist. She had built her career on her ability to analyze a situation, cut her losses, and move on. And as the anger faded, it was replaced by a cool, clear-eyed assessment. Adam hadn't been a monster. He had been a ghost, a man haunted by his own choices. And she had been a fool to think she could build a future with a man who was still living in the past. She had thrown herself back into her work, landing a promotion that came with a transfer to the firm's Paris office. She had packed up her apartment, sold her car, and boarded a plane without a backward glance. Paris suited her. It was a city that, like her, did not apologize for its own beauty or its own ambition. She was good at her job. She was making new friends. She was even attempting to learn French, with predictably disastrous but hilarious results. She took a sip of her wine and watched the people stroll by, a moving tapestry of life and love and commerce. She thought of Adam, briefly and without bitterness. She hoped he was okay. She hoped he had found whatever it was he was looking for. But his story was no longer her concern. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from a man she'd met last week, a charming art dealer named Jean-Pierre. "Dinner tonight." "My treat," Lena smiled. She typed back a reply. "Only if you promise to mock my terrible French." He replied instantly with a winking emoji. She finished her wine, paid her bill, and walked out into the Parisian sunshine. She was not a placeholder. She was not a second choice. She was Lena Brooks, and she was the main character in her own story. And the next chapter, she decided, was going to be magnificent. A year after the disastrous weekend at the Heron's Crest Lodge, Adam Mercer drove back up the winding mountain road. The air was the same, thin and crisp and smelling of pine. But he was a different man. He had left his high-powered law firm 6 months ago, taking a significant pay cut to join the East Side Legal Aid Clinic full-time. The sleek, glass and chrome apartment was gone, replaced by a smaller, more comfortable place closer to the clinic. His life was quieter now, less glamorous, but infinitely more fulfilling. He hadn't come back to the lodge. He had rented a small, rustic cabin on the other side of the lake, the one favored by fishermen and families, not corporate titans. He spent the weekend hiking the trails, his mind quiet for the first time in years. He thought about the man he had been, the relentless, ambitious creature who saw people as assets and relationships as transactions. He barely recognized that man anymore. On his last afternoon, he found himself drawn to the shoreline where he had last spoken to Nora. The large, smooth rocks were still there, warmed by the afternoon sun. He sat on the same rock where she had sat and looked out at the water. He had heard, through a mutual acquaintance, that she had named her son Leo. It was a good, strong name. He had also heard that Caleb Ross was still a constant presence in their lives. He felt a pang, not of jealousy, but of a quiet, resigned acceptance. Nora and Leo had a family, a good one. He was happy for them, genuinely happy. He had not seen or spoken to Nora since he sent the letter. She had never replied. He hadn't expected her to. The letter had been a closing of a chapter for him, not an opening for her. It was an acknowledgement of his own failures and a promise to himself to be better. He took a deep breath, the clean, pine-scented air filling his lungs. The lake was calm today, its surface a perfect, unbroken mirror reflecting the vast blue sky. He had come here a year ago to celebrate a victory. He was leaving now with a different kind of prize, a quiet sense of peace, a hard-won understanding of his own worth, measured not by the size of his bank account, but by the content of his character. He didn't know what the future held. There was no new woman in his life, no grand plan for his career. There was just the quiet, steady work of being a better man, one day at a time. He stood up, stretched, and started the walk back to his cabin. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the water. The past was a part of him. He knew that now. It was a landscape of regret and mistakes, but it was also the foundation upon which he was building his new life. He could not change the past, but he could honor it by living his future with integrity and compassion and a quiet, humble grace. The lake was still, and so at last was his heart. I hope you enjoyed this story of heartbreak, redemption, and the courage to build a new life. If this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with a friend, and subscribing for more content like this. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Which character did you relate to the most? What did you think of Adam's journey? Your engagement helps this community grow, and I can't wait to read what you have to say. Thank you for watching.
The city hummed outside Brooks's apartment window, a steady, busy sound that matched the rhythm of his life. For Brooks, life was a checklist. He woke up at exactly 6:15, his alarm clock a harsh intruder in the quiet morning. He drank his coffee black because cream and sugar took extra time and thought he did not want to give. He walked to his job as a manager at a bustling furniture company, his mind already racing through the day's tasks. The orders to be filled, the customers to please, the problems to be solved. His friends often joked that he was married to his work, and Brooks, in his quieter moments, knew they were right. His apartment was neat, tidy, and a little bit lonely, but he told himself he preferred it that way. There was no room for the messy, complicated business of love. It was a distraction he simply could not afford. His best friend, Mike, saw things differently. Mike was a man who believed in laughter, in long, pointless conversations, and in the magic of meeting new people. One Friday evening he showed up at Brooks's door, refusing to take no for an answer. "You're coming to this party," Mike declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. "It's not a request, Brooks. It's an intervention. You're going to talk to someone who doesn't care about delivery schedules or wood grain." Brooks reluctantly agreed, putting on a clean shirt and following Mike out the door with a sigh. The party was loud and crowded, filled with the clinking of glasses and waves of laughter that seemed to crash against the walls. Brooks stood near a wall, a drink in his hand feeling more like a prop than a beverage. He watched people mingle, their conversations appearing effortless, and he felt a world apart from them. This was a waste of a perfectly good evening he could have spent catching up on paperwork. And then he saw her. She was across the room, standing in a circle with her own group of friends. Her name was Ivy. She was not loud, but when she laughed at something a friend said, the sound seemed to cut through all the other noise, clear and warm. She had a way of listening, really listening, her head tilted as someone spoke, her eyes focused and kind. Brooks found he couldn't look away. He watched the easy way she moved, the gentle smile that played on her lips. She was beautiful, but it was more than that. She had a warmth about her, a glow that drew him in like a cold man to a fireplace. Mike nudged him hard. "See something you like?" he whispered with a grin. Brooks usually would have shaken his head, made an excuse, and found a corner to hide in. But something was different tonight. Looking at Ivy, he felt a strange, unfamiliar pull. It wasn't about love or forever. Those concepts were too big, too complicated. It was a simple, powerful want. He wanted to talk to her. He wanted to hear that laugh directed at something he said. For the first time in a long time, his checklist of tasks faded from his mind, replaced by a single daunting objective: walk over there. His heart hammered against his ribs as he crossed the room. His step felt heavy. What would he even say? His usual lines about work would surely bore her. He needed to be honest. Brutally, simply honest. It was the only way he knew how to be. He finally reached her group. Her friends noticed him first, their conversation trailing off as he approached. Ivy turned and her eyes, a soft shade of brown, met his. Up close she was even more captivating. "Hi," Brooks said, his voice a bit rough. "I'm Brooks." "Ivy," she replied, her smile polite but curious. He took a deep breath. The party noise seemed to fade into a dull roar around them. "I saw you from across the room," he started, his words tumbling out in a rush of honesty. "And I know this is going to sound forward, but I'm a very busy person. My life is full. I don't really have the time or space for a girlfriend or a big, complicated relationship." He paused, gathering his nerve. "But I would be lying if I said I didn't want to spend time with you. Just for one night. No promises about tomorrow. Just dinner. Just conversation. I think it would be a shame to never talk to you." He finished, his face feeling warm. He was sure he had messed it up. He was sure she would laugh in his face or turn away. Ivy studied him, her head tilted just as it had been when she was listening to her friend. Her expression was unreadable. She was used to men who pretended to want a future, who said all the right things only to disappear. This was different. This was strangely refreshing. This man was not offering her a fairy tale. He was offering one single, honest evening. A slow, genuine smile spread across her face, erasing the last of her polite curiosity. "One night," she repeated, her voice laced with amusement. "One night," Brooks confirmed, his heart still pounding. She looked at him for a moment longer, as if making a very important decision. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice clear and sure. "One night." And in that moment, with those two simple words, the perfectly ordered world Brooks had built for himself began, ever so slightly, to crack. The week that stretched between the party and their agreed-upon Friday night felt to Brooks like an entire season had passed. The steady, predictable rhythm of his life had been disrupted. The numbers on his spreadsheet seemed to blur together, and the constant ring of his office phone became an irritating distraction rather than the sound of business. His mind, usually a fortress of focus, had developed a leak, and through that leak poured thoughts of Ivy. He wondered what she was doing at that very moment. He replayed the sound of her voice saying "okay" on a loop in his memory. He found himself staring out his apartment window, not seeing the city, but instead picturing her face. This internal distraction was both unsettling and, he had to admit, thrilling. For a man who prided himself on control, he was alarmingly comfortable with this new lack of it. Meanwhile, Ivy moved through her own week with a quiet, buzzing sense of anticipation. She was a practical woman, a graphic designer who built her world out of careful choices and intentional designs. She had dated before, of course, but it had always felt like a performance, a dance where both partners knew the steps but no one heard the music. Brooks's blunt honesty had been a shock to that system. There were no games, no hidden meanings. It was a single, clear proposition. As Friday approached, a question formed in her mind. What does one wear for a night that is promised to have no tomorrow? She stood in front of her closet, pushing past the safe choices, the comfortable blouses and reliable little black dresses. Her hand stopped on a dress she had bought on a whim months ago but had never found the right occasion to wear. It was a deep, crimson red, a color that spoke of confidence and passion, a color that demanded to be seen. She slipped it on. The fabric felt different against her skin, not just cloth but a declaration. Looking in the mirror, she saw a version of herself that was bolder, more sure. This was not a dress for hiding. It was a dress for being truly, completely seen, if only for one night. Brooks arrived at the restaurant first, a habit born from his need for order. He chose a table, ordered a glass of water, and tried to steady his nerves. He told himself this was just a meal, a conversation, a single page in the book of his life. He rehearsed a few casual topics in his head. Then the door to the restaurant opened, and every rehearsed word evaporated from his mind. Ivy stood in the doorway, her eyes scanning the room. And then she saw him, and a small warm smile touched her lips. The red dress seemed to pull all the light in the room toward her. It was simple in its cut, but on her, it was a masterpiece. As she walked toward the table, Brooks felt something primal and powerful stir within him, a feeling so intense it was almost a physical force. It was more than just finding her attractive. It was a breathtaking, all-consuming recognition of her beauty that short-circuited his usual calm and collected nature. He stood up, a little too quickly, his chair scraping softly against the floor. "You look—" he started, but the words he knew, nice, beautiful, pretty, felt like children's toys, utterly inadequate for the moment. He was a man who worked with solid, tangible things like wood and fabric, and he had no vocabulary for this. He simply shook his head, a slight, helpless gesture, and finished, "Incredible." And in that one word, he poured all the astonishment he was feeling. Ivy felt a blush warm her cheeks. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. It felt like a red dress kind of night. They sat and the waiter brought menus. But the planned script for the evening was already forgotten. The conversation that began was not the stilted, interview-like dialogue of a first date. It was as if a dam had broken. They started with the usual safe topics: their jobs, where they grew up, but each answer led to a story and each story revealed a piece of their character. Brooks spoke about the first piece of furniture he ever built with his grandfather, the smell of sawdust and the feel of smooth wood under his hands, and Ivy could see the passion behind his business-minded exterior. Ivy talked about the frustration and joy of creating a perfect design, of making something not just functional but beautiful, and Brooks understood that she, too, was a builder, just in a different medium. They discovered a shared, secret love for terrible disaster movies, the kind with shaky special effects and overdramatic actors. They argued playfully over the best flavor of ice cream, only to find they both championed the simple, perfect combination of chocolate and vanilla. Brooks confessed he secretly loved growing herbs on his balcony, and Ivy admitted she could never keep a plant alive. They laughed, deep, genuine laughs that came from a place of true connection. Brooks, who had planned to keep a careful emotional distance, found himself leaning in, hanging on her every word. He was not just listening, he was absorbing her. The sound of her voice, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the graceful movement of her hands as she spoke, it all wove a spell around him. The one night he had so clinically proposed began to feel like a lie. This didn't feel temporary. This felt like a beginning. The restaurant around them seemed to fade into a soft blur. The clatter of plates and the murmur of other conversations became a distant soundtrack to their own private world. He looked at her, sitting there in her brilliant red dress, her face animated and alive, and a terrifying, wonderful thought bloomed in his chest. He did not want this to end. He did not want to say goodnight and walk away forever. The plan was in ruins, and he had never been happier to see a plan fail. The check came and a quiet panic set in. The night was slipping away. He paid, his mind racing, searching for a way to stretch the seconds into minutes, the minutes into hours. As they stepped out of the warm restaurant and into the cool night air, the city lights twinkled around them. The logical thing, the thing his original plan demanded, was to call a car, take her home, and end the agreement. But his heart was now beating a different, more urgent rhythm. "It's a nice night," he said, his voice a little husky. Would you like to go for a walk? There's a park just down the street." It was a simple question, but it was so much more. It was a plea. It was the first step off the map he had so carefully drawn for himself, and into the unknown territory of a feeling that was growing too fast and too strong to be contained to a single night. The park was a pocket of silence nestled within the sleeping city. The frantic energy of the downtown streets softened here, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves in a night breeze and the soft, distant glow of lampposts that cast long, dancing shadows on the path. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the quiet rhythm of their footsteps on the pavement, a syncopated beat accompanying the whirlwind of thoughts in Brooks's head. He could still feel the warmth of the restaurant, the ghost of her laughter in his ears, the vivid image of her in that red dress burned onto the back of his eyelids. The clinical, one-night proposition he had made now felt like something a stranger had said. That stranger had not known the weight of Ivy's gaze, or the intelligence in her questions, or the way her mere presence could make the air itself feel different. Ivy walked beside him, her arms wrapped lightly around herself against the cool air. She felt wonderfully, terrifyingly off balance. This was not what she had prepared for. She had braced for a pleasant, finite evening, a charming short story to be tucked away in a drawer of memories. She had not prepared for the deep, resonant chord Brooks had struck within her. She had not expected to find his quiet intensity so captivating, or his sudden, boyish smiles so disarming. The man walking beside her was not the blunt, emotionally detached man from the party. This man was thoughtful, he was funny in a dry, unexpected way, and the way he looked at her now made her feel not like a temporary diversion, but like the only person in the world. Brooks finally stopped walking, turning to face her under the canopy of a large ancient oak tree. Its branches were a dark lace against the indigo sky. The light from a nearby lamp caught the side of her face, illuminating the gentle curve of her cheek and the thoughtful look in her eyes. His heart was a frantic drum against his ribs, so loud he was sure she must be able to hear it. This was the moment. This was where his original plan demanded a polite handshake, a thank you for a lovely evening, and a permanent farewell. But the words that formed in his throat were entirely different. "Ivy," he began, his voice low and slightly unsteady. He shoved his hands into his pockets to keep them from reaching for her. "I need to tell you something." She looked up at him, her expression open and waiting. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs. "I was an idiot," he said, the words feeling truer than anything he had ever spoken. "At the party when I said that, about one night. I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I had my life completely figured out. It was all boxes and lists and schedules. I thought I was too busy for anything else. I thought I didn't have the space." He paused, his eyes searching hers, desperate for her to understand. "But being with you tonight, talking to you, laughing with you, it didn't feel like it was taking up space. It felt like it was the space. It felt like everything else was just the noise around it." Ivy felt her breath catch. This was more than an apology, it was a dismantling. He was taking apart the walls he had built, brick by brick, right in front of her. "What I'm trying to say," he continued, his voice gaining a new strength, a new certainty, "is that I don't want this to be our only night. I don't want to say goodnight and never see you again. I was wrong. Completely, totally wrong. I want to see you again. I want to know what your Tuesday afternoons are like. I want to know what you think about when you first wake up. I want a chance." The silence that followed was thick and full of meaning. It was not an empty silence, but a living, breathing thing, holding his confession and her decision in its balance. Ivy looked at this man, standing vulnerable and honest before her, admitting a fault she knew must have been deeply ingrained in his character. He was offering her a key to a door he had kept locked for so long. The simplicity and raw truth of it melted the last of her reservations. A slow, radiant smile spread across her face, a smile that reached her eyes and made them sparkle in the lamplight. "I was hoping you'd say that," she said softly. "I don't want this to end either." Relief, warm and powerful, washed over Brooks, so intense it nearly buckled his knees. Without a second thought, he closed the small distance between them. He brought one hand up, his fingers gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek, his touch feather-light and reverent. His other hand found the small of her back, drawing her closer. He looked into her eyes, a silent question, and seeing her answer there, he finally, slowly lowered his mouth to hers. It was not a kiss of fiery passion, not yet. It was something far more profound. It was a kiss of promise. It was soft and searching, a gentle exploration that held the weight of his apology and the hope of their future. It was a first, quiet hello to a story they were only just beginning to write. Her hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palms, a rhythm that now felt like it was beating for her. When they finally parted, the world around them had shifted. The park was the same, the city was the same, but everything was different. The boundary of a single night had been erased, and in its place stretched an open road, leading into a future that was suddenly, wonderfully unknown. The days and weeks that followed their walk in the park were a season of quiet, joyful discovery for Brooks and Ivy. The artificial boundary of their one night had vanished, replaced by an open field of possibility that they explored with a sense of wonder. This was no longer a negotiated agreement, it was a choice renewed with every text message, every phone call, and every date. Brooks, the man of schedules and checklists, found a new kind of rhythm, one dictated not by the clock, but by the simple, eager anticipation of seeing Ivy again. Their time together was a collection of ordinary moments that felt extraordinary. They went on a picnic in the very same park where they had shared their first kiss, sprawled on a checkered blanket with a basket of simple food. Brooks told her stories about his grandfather, his voice softening with a fondness Ivy had never heard before. Ivy, in turn, confessed her secret dream of one day illustrating a children's book, her face alight with a passion that made Brooks's chest feel tight. They spent a rainy Saturday afternoon on his sofa, a bowl of popcorn between them, watching one of the terribly wonderful disaster movies they both loved. They laughed until their sides ached, her head eventually finding its way to his shoulder, his arms settling comfortably around her. It was a simple touch, but it felt like a milestone. It felt like home. Brooks's tidy apartment began to show subtle signs of her presence. A hair tie left on his bathroom counter. A particular brand of tea in his cupboard. A sweater forgotten on a chair that he didn't rush to return, liking the way it looked there, a splash of her color in his monochrome world. These small, physical reminders of her were anchors, tethering him to this new reality, a reality that was infinitely better than the lonely, ordered one he had so carefully constructed. As their comfort with each other grew, so did the depth of their physical connection. It was a slow, natural unfurling, like a flower opening to the sun. Their goodnight kisses at her doorstep, which had started as soft promises, began to linger. They grew longer, deeper, filled with a warmth that spread through their veins. The gentle, exploring touch of his hands on her back became more sure. Her fingers, which once rested lightly on his chest, would now curl into the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer. There was a new language developing between them, spoken not with words but with breath and touch. It was an intimacy built not on haste, but on a foundation of growing trust and affection. It was the physical expression of all the things they were learning to say to each other, the I like you, the I trust you, the I'm happy when I'm with you. One evening they were cooking dinner together in her small, warm kitchen. The air was filled with the scent of garlic and herbs. Brooks was chopping vegetables and Ivy was stirring a pot on the stove. She came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her cheek against his back. He stilled, the knife in his hand hovering over a tomato. He could feel the steady beat of her heart against his spine. It was a simple, domestic gesture, but it struck him with more force than any kiss. This was what it felt like to be a part of something. This was partnership. He finished chopping, washed his hands and turned around, pulling her into his arms. He didn't say anything. He just held her, his chin resting on the top of her head, while the sauce simmered on the stove behind them. The silence was comfortable, full. In that moment, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, the meal they were making together, the easy way their bodies fit, Brooks understood that he wasn't just building a relationship. He was building a new understanding of himself. The man who had believed he was too busy for love was now discovering that love wasn't a distraction from life. It was the very thing that made his life feel full and real and worth living. Every shared laugh, every quiet conversation, every lingering touch was another brick laid in the foundation of something strong, something built not for a night but for a lifetime. A year, in the life of a busy man like Brooks, could often feel like the turning of a single, swift page. But this past year with Ivy had felt like an entire, beautifully written volume. The seasons had changed, marking their time together. They had navigated a sweltering summer with picnics in the shade, crunched through autumn leaves on long, talking walks, and spent a cozy winter curled up by her fireplace, the world outside forgotten. Through it all, the foundation they had built, brick by patient brick, had only grown stronger and more solid. Brooks was no longer the man who saw love as a complication. He was a man who understood it as the central, supporting pillar of his entire world. And he knew, with a certainty that felt as fundamental as his own heartbeat, that he never wanted to live in a world without Ivy in it. The planning began in secret, with a nervous, thrilling visit to a quiet jeweler. He didn't want a large, flashy stone. He wanted something elegant and timeless, just like the woman he loved. He chose a ring with a simple, beautiful diamond, one that would catch the light and remind her of their night under the lampposts. He then enlisted the help of Mike and Ivy's best friend, a conspiracy of joy to make the moment perfect. The plan was set for the evening of the anniversary of their first date, the night of the red dress. When the day arrived, Brooks felt a nervous energy humming under his skin. He suggested a walk after dinner, just like they had taken a year before. Ivy, suspecting nothing more than a sweet gesture to commemorate their anniversary, happily agreed, looping her arm through his as they stepped out into the cool evening. The city lights were just beginning to twinkle as they made their familiar way toward the park. The air felt charged, electric with the secret Brooks carried in his pocket and in his heart. He led her down the path, their footsteps quiet on the pavement. He could feel the small, hard box pressing against his leg with every step, a constant, thrilling reminder of what was to come. They reached the very same ancient oak tree, its branches now adorned with the fresh, green leaves of a new spring. It stood as a silent witness, just as it had been a year ago. Brooks stopped and turned to face her, taking both of her hands in his. His palms were slightly damp, his heart thundering so loudly he was sure the entire city could hear it. "Ivy," he began, his voice thick with emotion. He had rehearsed a speech, but the words fled his mind, leaving only the pure, unvarnished truth. "A year ago I stood right here and told you I was an idiot. I told you I had been wrong about everything." He squeezed her hands, his eyes locked on hers, seeing the beautiful confusion beginning to dawn in them. That was the truest thing I've ever said. I was wrong to think my life was full without you. I was wrong to believe that one night could ever be enough. He released one of her hands and slowly, carefully, lowered himself to one knee on the soft earth. Ivy's free hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening, glistening with sudden, understanding tears. The world around them seemed to hold its breath. That one night, Brooks continued, his voice gaining strength, filled with all the love he had discovered in the 365 days that had followed, wasn't an ending. It was the first sentence of our story. And Ivy, I don't want our story to ever end. I don't want one night or 1 year or 10 years. I want every single page. I want all the chapters, the happy ones and the difficult ones, as long as I get to write them with you. He pulled the small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. The diamond caught the faint light, sparkling with a promise. Will you make me the happiest man in the world? Will you marry me? Ivy was crying fully now, happy tears streaming down her face as she looked from the ring to the face of the man she loved more than anything. There was not a single moment of hesitation. Yes, she cried out, her voice a mixture of a laugh and a sob. Yes, Brooks, 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and rose to his feet, pulling her into his arms. They held each other tightly, their embrace saying everything that words could not. This was not an end, but a glorious new beginning. The promise of that first gentle kiss under this very tree had bloomed into a forever. Their one night had led them here to a love that would last a lifetime. If you were moved by Brooks and Ivy's journey from a single night to a forever promise, and you want to read more stories about love, connection, and the moments that change everything, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue to tell tales that capture the heart.